All right, so now that we have a high-level overview of transform, let's actually dive into some of the functions that I talked about. And the first one we'll talk about is called translate or translation. So what this will allow us to do is essentially shift something across the screen, up or down, left or right, or any combination of those using X and Y coordinates. So here's an example. This will take all divs and shift them over 100 pixels on the X axis, in this case, translate X. There's also translate Y, and then there's also just a translate where you can pass in two values, which I'll show all three versions in just a moment. So again, transform is a property, colon, the function. And in this case, I'm using translate X, which will shift this over all divs 100 pixels to the right. So rather than just trusting me, let's hop over to CodePen. I have a very simple demo set up. I have 4 paragraphs. They're styled exactly the same right now. They just have a width and a height to make them square, 50 pixels, and then a background color so we can see them. No content inside. However, I've given 2 of them classes, move right and move down. They currently don't do anything. There are no corresponding styles, but we're about to change that. So what we'll do is use translate to move this paragraph to the right. So we'll select it first. We'll do p.move-right, or we could have just done move right. And we'll start, let's change the color so it stands out a bit. Background, color. I gave myself a little cheat sheet up here so I didn't have to remember these. Not that it matters. Okay, so this blue one, we want to shift to the right. So we'll use transform, colon, translate, and we'll start with translate X. And it's up to us. Let's do 100 pixels to make it clear. And there we go. It's moved over 100 pixels to the right. Now I could do 1,000 pixels, move it far away. I could do 1 pixel and just barely shift it, but I'll keep it at 100 for now. I could also do negative, like let's do -10. And you can see it starts to go off the screen, but it is offset 10 pixels. Okay, back to 100. Let's do the same thing now for move down. And let me just copy this color again. So we'll have background, color. So this div here at the bottom, that yellow-orange one, we'll do a transform. Let me make this a bit bigger. And rather than doing translate X, I'm going to do translate Y this time. And we'll move it down. Let's do 20 pixels for now. And you can see it shifted down. If I comment this out and save, it comes back up, and I uncomment, it moves down. So that's the basics of translate, but I did mention that there's a third variation, just regular translate, where you pass in 2 values. And so we can take a look at that now. Let's do it with a hover. So p hover will translate things over. So we'll do a transform, translate, and not X or Y, just translate. And then let's pass in something like 20 pixels, comma, 20 pixels, just like that. So now let's go to this first one here. You can see I've translated it down and to the right because I did 20 pixels to the right, 20 pixels down, X and then Y. And there it goes. Same thing here. Now you might notice something a bit odd. When I do it on the 2 that have already been translated over, it's not moving down and to the right. And that's because translate is still working with the same original origin. So it still is treating our paragraph like it was centered over here. And so it's moving it 20 pixels down and 20 pixels over from here, which would be around there, which is what's happening. Same thing here. It's only moving it over 20 pixels because we've already shifted it down 20 pixels. So there are ways around this, but the honest truth is that usually you're not translating things like this. If you want something to start out 20 pixels over or 100 pixels over, you just have it start out there without having to translate it. Translate is usually used in cases like this, even though this is a hideous, it's not even an animation, but this is a hideous experience. Translate is usually used when it's triggered. So something is rotated, something is translated over, scaled, whatever the transform is. It's not usually happening when the page loads, because otherwise you should just have that default state already initialized. There's no reason to have to use transform when there are plenty of other valid ways of moving things. So this is really mainly reserved for things like animations, hover, whatever other states you have. Okay, so just to wrap up, translate, we pass it in along with transform. So we can't just do translate on its own. It's part of transform. It's a function. There's translate x, translate y, and then translate, which takes x and y. And then that weird little gotcha thing is that if we've already translated something over, if we then further translate, it still is working with the original origin. And like I said, there is a way around this. There's a property that allows you to change the origin, but really the better way of doing it is just putting something where you want it when the page loads and then translating it from there, rather than doing a double translate. Okay, so that's translate. We're going to move on, talk about rotate and scale next.